Floyd Street's finest, a Louisville basketball podcast, part of the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm Jeff Greer, your host, your friend. It's a beautiful day outside, but of course it's March, so I'm inside getting ready to watch some basketball. It is officially championship week, even though it's already been championship week for a week, if that makes sense. We got Bob Valvano as my guest today, and we talk about his career as a broadcaster, which I'm very interested in, how he got into the radio side of things. He came up through the coaching ranks, of course, with his brother, and has been around in Louisville, coached at Bellarmine for a long time, and has been in the media game as well for a long time. So I was curious how he got into radio and got into his color analysis and all of those things, and really became the guy we've come to trust and listen to alongside Paul Rogers as the voices of Louisville basketball for 2 decades now, plus. And we had Paul on, so I thought, you know what? I know deep down Bob is furious that I've had Paul on and not Bob. And it just didn't feel right. It felt out of balance to not have Bob on after having Paul on. And who better to give a breakdown of the ACC tournament and what to expect this week than a guy who's going to be calling a bunch of those games, not just on Louisville, but for ESPN radio. So before we do that, 2 items of note. One is I would highly recommend that you subscribe to the Field of 68 YouTube channel. We're unrolling some great moments in March with interviews from all sorts of different people, from producing famous moments in the NCAA tournament over many, many years. Really great project, and I think people will enjoy it for years to come, not just this year as we roll those out. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And on a personal note, do me a favor, if you haven't already, go check out jeffgreer.substack.com to find the Floyd Street Tribune newsletter. There's a little theme there with the Floyd Street. I write every Thursday for paid subscribers only. It's $7 a month if you want to join. There's a couple of other options for subscription plans, including $90 for a year, and doing Zoom happy hours with me and a couple of other knuckleheads who subscribe. And it's been really fun so far. We've had 3 of them, if my math serves. Yeah, 3 of them. And it's been very, very fun talking to Louisville fans about their team, some of their favorite memories, yada, yada, yada. It's a great time. If you're interested, by all means, subscribe to the 6th Man plan. You can also get a yearly subscription for $75. I'm going to be writing through the off season. So this is a year-long thing for me, and hopefully beyond that. But if nothing else, you can get the monthly subscription and just pay attention for the next few weeks until the season ends. And then I'll start getting into what I think the roster might look like next year. So you can do all of that, jeffgreer.substack.com. I've been posting about the NCAA tournament and the profile for Louisville a bunch of times. So go check it out, see if you like it, and we'll see where things lie. I think Louisville is a tournament team regardless of what happens on Wednesday. I would say, though, that if they lose Wednesday, presumably to Duke, as we get into with Bob, I would not enjoy the rest of the week if I were a Louisville fan. I'll put it that way. I think it would be likely that they still get in, likelier than them not getting in. But I do think that they might have a little bit more reason to sweat than if they were just went ahead, complete the 3-game sweep of Duke and move on to the quarterfinals. I think that would help them a lot. All of that said, I really hope that you enjoy this conversation with Bob. I think Louisville is such an interesting team. They've had so many hard issues to deal with through this course of the season, and it's do or die time. They've got win or out this week, and then win or out for the season, presumably starting next week. And I also just want to say real quick, thank you to everyone for all of the kind comments about the Christy Mack interview, which was last week. I had a great time doing it. She was awesome. And I appreciate the kind words from everyone. It's been one of the best received. Obviously, on the tail end or on the back end of that, everyone hated both Mike Rutherford podcasts, but they really liked the Christy Mack one. So thank you for letting me know that. Hey, by the way, it's that time of year, folks. Conference tournaments are tipping off. Bubble teams are making their final push for a bid, while the best teams in the country are gearing up for a deep run. Auto bids will be punched, slippers will be fit, and our partners at DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook, are putting my listeners, you guys, at the center of the action. If you bet $4 on an underdog in a select game this week, Pitt, I don't know if they're an underdog this week. That's a terrible suggestion. And that underdog wins, you win $256. That's right, $256. So here's how it works. Download the app now, the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and use the promo code FIELD68 when you sign up. Scroll through the list of select underdogs, bet $4 on them to win, and cash $256 when they do. There is no better way for you to put your college hoops knowledge to use than to put your money where your mouth is with DraftKings Sportsbook. It's safe, it's secure, it's reliable, and you can deposit and withdraw your funds at your convenience. So remember, that's code FIELD68, FIELD68, to turn $4 into $256. For a limited time only, you must be 21 years or older to join. Restrictions apply. Go to DraftKings.com for details. And if you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. Now here's my interview with Bob Valvano. All right. We welcome in my buddy, Bob Valvano. Bob, how are you, man?
Jeff, great to catch up with you. You are the hardest working man in show business right now. You're radio, writing, the analyst, you're doing everything. So keep it up. Good luck. You're doing well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just trying to keep up with you, man. You've got your assignments for this week. I know it's always a busy time of year for you, traveling around. I feel like I saw you more at the airport in the gate to fly to Atlanta or something like that than I ever did actually at the radio station. So it's kind of funny that things turn out that way. But before we get into Louisville and talking about the ACC tournament and obviously the teams that you have seen over the course of this very bizarre season, I had Paul Rogers on a few weeks ago, and he was mad at me that I didn't tell him we were doing Zoom because he hadn't shaved, and I told him it was so pixelated that you would have no idea that he hadn't shaved. He looked great.
Well, no, you see, I did shave because I had a feeling we were going to be Zooms today.
There you go.
Smooth as a baby's bottom. But anyway.
There you go. I like that. So how did you, how did you get into the color analysis thing? And I know radio is a much different medium than TV, and you guys have great chemistry of you knowing when to get in there. But how did you first get into this side of basketball?
Well, it was really strange. Long story made short, I was coaching at Bellarmine, and they've really blossomed now. But we had a pretty good year, and then the whole university went through some really severe budget cuts. And I just was the thought of kind of having to rebuild all over again because they were going to eliminate my full-time assistant and everything. And so while I was there, the late Jay McGowan, who was the president, who's the best president I ever worked for, what a wonderful guy. He said to me, look, we are who we are. At that time, they were a Division II program. He said, it's hard for us to get people to know what's going on. I want you to be as visible as you can. Go do stuff. I said, what do you mean? He said, anywhere you can get out there, do stuff. So I did a local radio show for sports, and then and it went up the ladder. I started on a very small station, and then I went to a little bigger station. Then I wound up on 840, which is the biggest station in the market. And then they had a program director named Rick Belcher who said, I think you're pretty good at that. How'd you like to do regular radio? So I started doing I did all the day parts. I sat in for Terry Miners. I sat in for the morning show. I sat in for the sports show. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing a lot of stuff there. And when the Bellarmine thing, was going to kind of be in a rebuild mode, I said, I think I'll try and pursue the media stuff. And there was a guy named John Dorkin, the late John Dorkin, who was running WDRB at the time. And they had the rights to the Louisville games. And he said, I'd like for you to come and be our color analyst. So I did the analyst for the DRB for the Louisville games for a year or two. And then Paul needed a radio analyst about 2 years later. And he said, would you like to do the radio? And so they have been so good to me over there. I would do the radio when I wasn't doing TV. And, so I was keeping busy every single game. And it's carried over till now. The only difference is I don't have the local TV now. I do the Louisville games and the games when I have the opportunity. When I'm not doing them, I'm doing the ESPN national games on radio. So, and that's, I don't want to say nice things about Paul, because I'm sure he doesn't say anything nice about me, but he's been really good about that. I mean, I sometimes, especially this year, the schedule's changed by the hour. I'm sorry I can't be with you Saturday. And, I'm very lucky. I work with really good people at the network also. Sean Kelly and Mark Kestish usually, and Paul and I have done it together so long. It's hard to believe 2 decades now. So we're he's a good guy to be with. We play golf together. So I think that comes across on the air. At least I hope it does, that we like each other. And he's given me a great deal of respect for what I do. And I think I've done the same for him. So it's hard to believe all these things just happened, but they did.
Well, this, but in my 6 years on the beat between the Athletic and the Courier Journal, I really liked coming to sit with you guys just for a few minutes and just kind of see how the travel was and see how you guys were doing. And it felt like I was hanging out with two brothers. Like you guys just play off each other. The personalities work, and it comes through on the air too. I mean, there have been probably more this year than ever before I've listened to you guys on the radio. We're moving and we've had all these different reasons to be in the car during parts of these games. And I listen to you guys, and it reminds me of, I'm a New England guy. So it reminds me of growing up in New England and listening to Gil Santos and Gino Cappelletti calling the Patriots games back in the day. And and I know football is a totally different animal than basketball on radio, but they always had good chemistry. And they always knew when to come in and when it was the play-by-play guy needed to be, locked in and all that stuff. And was that just for you guys? Was that just reps, or how did you develop that kind of on camera or on air, I should say, chemistry that comes through for everyone else?
Well, as I said, I've been lucky. Paul has not been a guy that gave me a sheet and said, "All right, here's what you have to do." He's kind of he'll nudge me here or nudge me there if there's something he wants to have done, and I've kind of done the same thing. But I had really good instructors at the national level. I had a guy named John Martin who was our executive producer, and he said very simply, he said, "If you want a general rule, try and limit your discussion to when the ball's in the backcourt. If you do that, you give the play-by-play guy plenty of time to catch everybody up with what's going on. And then you have to work out with your broadcast partner how much you're going to say during free throws, because some guys like to turn it into, at the line now is Jeff Greer. Interesting story without Jeff. He was a juggler in the circus till he was 10, and then he, then so you don't say anything. But fortunately, Paul and even the guys I work with at the national level say that's your chance to try, for lack of a better word, to teach. Get some, we'll do that. There's nothing, Sean Kelly, my national producer, there's nothing more boring than describing free throws on the radio. So tell people something you see. And so I react to what they say. The thing that took me longer with Paul is I have a tendency to enjoy the whimsical, shall I say. And he does too, but it was I began to understand where the line was, and you don't want to go too far. I never forget that the person listening to you can't see the game. You really can't go too far in TV either. But if you and I are knuckleheading it around, but the game's on TV, the viewer can still see what's going on. Radio, he has no idea. So while you're talking about bowling alleys or some crazy thing, what's happening here? I can't see anything. So we've been very cognizant of making sure that, the listener is getting the first and foremost, getting the picture of what's happening in the game. I was told, I've done, as I told you, I've done some TV. So, and I know it's not an ego thing. It doesn't mean you're not important on either one, but the TV is the analyst's medium. Radio is the play-by-play guy's medium. And if you remember that, you'll do well. So at the end of the game, if you're excited, you got to give him a chance to paint the word picture about, and with that shot, the Cards will move on to the semi. It's not your place to jump in there. The one thing Paul does, which is good for me, there's two things that I love about working with him. He does well. Are both diehard rooting for the Cards. I grew up in New York with great play-by-play guys, and you don't broadcast. And I know some listeners wish we would, but he does not believe in we're down 6, we're down 4. We need. He doesn't call it we. We're not playing. We're just describing it for you. Well, know where our hearts are, but we're just describing it. So he doesn't use we, and he doesn't want me to either. And I'm comfortable with that. You grew up in New York, the Marv Alberts of the world, the Mike Breens. So those guys don't do that, and I would feel uncomfortable doing that, even though I'm rooting for Louisville. I would feel uncomfortable with that, and I think that's a good thing. And he's, like I said, we just have some. Oh, and the other thing he does not like is sometimes I can't help it, and you see this all the time now, Jeff, with broadcasters. While the ball's in play, the broadcaster sounds like he's in an old Batman sitcom. He's making all these sounds. Ooh, hey, ooh, wow. Ian. I was like, would you shut up? I'm trying to describe the game. So sometimes I can't help it. Like, a guy goes up for a shot and gets undercut and flips on his head. I remember Luke Whitehead once. Oh, my God, I thought he was paralyzed. You're not going to sit there. I just spontaneously said, oh, that he understands. But the thoughts about, yes, or won't go, or something like that, he has no use for. And so that's good, because we all get emotional at times. I don't want to do that. Sometimes you don't realize you're doing it. He'll give me the side eye when I've got
all right. So that's interesting. I think that's I think something that people don't appreciate enough about the medium of announcing sports is how important that chemistry is, and how important knowing each other is. And obviously over many years and traveling together, and I know you guys sit near each other on the plane and stuff. I mean, you're around each other a lot. So I think that certainly cultivates that friendship and that relationship. Before we get into basketball side and picking your brain on what to expect this week, I have to ask you this, because I know that we have talked about this before. Italian food. All right. So you and your son, we've talked about it many times. You guys are experts on the subject. I have eaten many Italian meals over the years growing up in Rhode Island, even though I am not Italian.
Yeah, good Italian population of Providence. Nice Italian.
Unbelievable. We would have these spaghetti dinners the night before a soccer game. And, it's supposed to be like carb loading for the kids. And if it was any of the Italian kids on the team, and we had a handful of them, Pisani, Iafredi, I mean, all these different players, their moms would serve us like 7-course meals with like stuffed shells and like all this. I'm like, lady, we're going to sleep through the game tomorrow because you're feeding us so much. But I have to ask, so what is the best restaurant, I guess, that you have ever had an Italian meal at?
In town or anywhere?
Anywhere.
Wow. Well, in town, if you like an affordable, kind of like, just an everyday kind of thing, Milantoni's is spectacular. It's an old Wendy's that this family took over. They've been in the restaurant business for a long time, and it is very reasonably priced. And I know when it's homemade recipes, and these are homemade recipes, so they're really, really extraordinary. If you want a special night out, I will always be grateful to Vincenzo. Vincenzo's is fantastic. I had to work one night on my this is back when I was doing shows at WHAS, and I had to do a show for my anniversary. And I had just been on the road a lot doing games, and here I am working my anniversary night. So I made it a thing on the radio. I was like, why should we invite you to our anniversary dinner? Darlene and I. And so people came on. It was like, there was an old game show. It's kind of pathetic, actually. People would come on. It's called Queen for a Day. And it was like these women would come on with these awful, desperate stories, and they would pick the one that was like the worst and give her like a new washer and dryer or something. So we had these families call, and they were funny. One was a guy had a skunk get in his house, and for the last 4 days they've been living like sleeping in their yard, and so we invited them, and we invited another couple, and the six of us had Vincenzo catered dinner for us on the air. He brought the food
that's
to
awesome.
WHAS, and the six of us ate, and it's a wonderful family, and their food is spectacular. So, and those are my two go-to places in town, I think.
Okay. That kind of reminds me of the Andrea Doria episode on Seinfeld, when George and the other guy who almost died on the ship have to go in front of the board to tell who has the worst sob story so they can get the rent controlled apartment in Manhattan.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So that was
I like
good.
that. That's great.
Yeah, it was fun. Okay. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I will tell you, I know this is cheating, but we did our honeymoon in the Amalfi Coast, and we were in Ravello, the little town up on the hill, and we stayed there. And all week we kept walking by this trattoria that's like the ultimate, that's like the family run, there's like 10 brothers and 7 sisters who are the servers, and then the grandma is in the back cooking, right? Exactly. And the villagers had kind of told us like, hey, it's really good. It's also where all the tourists go, so it might be tough to get in, but a lot of the villagers go there too. And the guy, we had a driver take us because it's so dangerous to drive in that part of the world. So we thought we wouldn't rent a car. So we had a guy drive us from Naples. And he's like, anytime I'm here in this area, I go to this place. So finally we go, and we had as an appetizer, a plate the size of like my torso of gnocchi, right? And gnocchi is my favorite. Gnocchi's my favorite pasta. And I punished it. I mean, I put it down like it was nothing. And the server comes back and he's like, you like it? You like the gnocchi? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, I bring you more. And I said, no, that's okay. We hadn't had our mains yet. And we hadn't had like our salads. I mean, we hadn't had like half the things. And he just brought out like 6 more plates of gnocchi in addition to all the other food. So I'll never forget that. But well,
that's a formula that Italians use. My mother used. You take the number of guests you expect for dinner, multiply it by the current number of U.S. senators, and that's how many you put. And you'll get it exactly right. You do that, you hit it right on the head. So I'm not surprised that was the story.
Yeah, well, and we ate like kings and queens in Italy.
Very nice, very nice.
All right, so let's talk about this week. I know that I'm sure Louisville fans are a little uneasy about their team right now for good reason. The resume is a little thin in some areas, especially if you compare it to other teams in their vicinity, so to speak, in the net and in all of the bubble scenarios and all of that stuff. They should, assuming the world doesn't stop on Tuesday or today, I should say, as we're recording this, they should probably end up playing Duke. So what do you think Louisville has to get out of that game? I mean, obviously a win, but what do you think needs to happen for them to beat Duke for a third time?
Well, I mean, I think they know the formula, but it's one of those things. It's easy to articulate, not always easy to execute. I mean, they've got to make sure Matthew Hurt doesn't, run wild on them. They got to make sure that a Goldwire doesn't wreak havoc. Louisville, when they've had their down days, they've had trouble taking care of the basketball. And Goldwire is fantastic at creating steals and creating easy baskets. I still, I quote him all the time. If you listen to the games. I've said it. Brown says all the time, all things created equal. A team that gets more easy baskets wins the game. And, Louisville's wins over Duke were not one-sided. It wasn't like Carolina over Duke the other day. They're games that are decided by a handful of possessions. So easy baskets are going to be a big deal. Now, what's amazing about Louisville of late, though, is how good an offensive rebounding team they've become. Mm-hmm. And Duke is not a good rebounding team. So if Louisville can get easy baskets by getting stickbacks, I think that can negate some of the things that go elsewhere. But the Louisville team in general, Jeff, and you know this right now, this is not a knock. I'm not trying to, in fact, I give them a lot of credit. Through everything that's gone on this year, they've been in there battling the whole way. They don't have a big margin for error. And all you got to do is look at the statistics and you see that they make about 5 threes a game. That's the game today. People shooting threes. In fact, if you were to list the 3 most important parts of the game right now, I think, I've always said for years I hated offense wins games, defense wins championships. I always thought that was some coach telling his team that so he could get his kids to play defense. But you got to play defense, but it's not the be all and end all. The most important parts of the game now are offense, rebounding, and defense. I think that's the order it goes in. Louisville can rebound, so they're good that way. They are good defensively, but their offense is not great. It's spotty and it grows in spurts, and and they rely so much in ACC games. Carlik Jones and David Johnson produced 43% of their points. Mm-hmm. So if you get a night like Carlik had in the season finale, he can't make anything, which can happen. I mean, it's rare. He's been good, but they don't have a lot of plan Bs in place. So I think that's the problem. The good news for Louisville is Duke doesn't really have a lot of plan Bs either right now. They're not good defensively. It seems strange to say that about a Mike Krzyzewski team. They give up 46% shooting from the field. That's really, really high. Mm-hmm. And what Mike has done is, he's become a manager of the game. He's flipped the script for his own team. A couple of years ago, when they had Zion and those guys, they were very thin. They could only go about 6 or 7 deep. And so to keep them out of foul trouble, he played zone. And the early part of the game played zone. You could get shots because they didn't want to foul by design. They played very kind of soft, containing. And then if they needed to late in the game, he'd go man-to-man, and then they'd get after him. Now it's flipped. He plays man-to-man early, and they still try to avoid fouling. But if he can keep it close at about, I've seen him do this 2 or 3 times now. If there's about 5-6 minutes to go, and it's close game, he goes home. And he thinks maybe he can steal 3 or 4 possessions while you don't adjust well in the zone. They play the zone fairly well, actually. So if he can get a couple of stops in his zone, he became good friends with Jim Boeheim, working with the national team, and he's taken some things from Jim. The way Syracuse plays his zone is unique. You get steals out of it. Mm-hmm. So he's trying. If they can steal 2 or 3 possessions there, they can steal the game, and that's what he does. You watch him, and he coaches like an NBA guy right now. He's talking in the first 3 quarters of the game, but the last 5 minutes he's up. He's calling sets. He's calling plays. He's orchestrating. That's what NBA guys do. He's trying to create matchups. So. And that's a problem because Louisville's had trouble late in games sometimes. They need a big basket. They haven't been able to get one. They made a turnover or 2 and the game's been on the line. So, and very hard, as cliched as it is, it's true. I don't care who you're playing. To beat the same team 3 times in a year is tough because they're the ones who are going to go make adjustments. You're kind of between a rock and a hard place. You want to make adjustments, but you think, why would I adjust it? We won twice. So it's tough. So it won't be easy. And I kind of agree with you. I think they're in, but I think they'd feel better if they got one more win, got a win in the tournament. And we always say that, but you know this, Jeff, you've done it as long as anybody. How do you know that there could be bid stealers? There's other leagues out there. We don't know how things are going to play out. So they're not exactly a lock. And I think, in fairness, if they were to win a game in the ACC tournament and they would get to the NCAA and win a game there, I know fans don't want to hear that. We're Louisville. That's not our definition. I'm not saying that's the ceiling, but without Malik Williams, if they did those things and with the way COVID has derailed them, not once, but many times, I think you could walk away and say those kids gave you what they had. They're very young. They're inexperienced. Mm-hmm. I said this before. I don't think they're a particularly smart team. Not that they're not smart people. They just, they're inexperienced. You got young kids. And so they make a lot of mistakes you see them make over and over again. Late in the game against Virginia, they fouled the 3-point shoot. You just can't do that. At this point in the season, you cannot do that. There's no excuse for doing that. But they're young, they're inexperienced, and teams do that. So I think they played very hard. Isn't it funny, though, as many people have said this, that if you do their resume, who knew the win over Georgia Tech might be the most impactful? But they've turned into a good team. They got the player of the year at Georgia Tech. And so it's going to be a wild year for the tournament. There's no question.
Yeah. Well, it's something. Drew Diener, I was on his show, I think yesterday. Actually, kind of caught me off guard with a good question, and he basically said, "What worked for Chris Mack at Xavier that maybe hasn't worked as well so far at Louisville?" It's tough because it's only his third season, so we don't have a huge sample size of games to work with and players to work with for Louisville. But something that definitely impacts this season, and a few of the things you talked about. One is he had a lot of, like, when their teams were really good, when they would go like 28-5 or something, and they get a 1, 2, 3 seed somewhere in there. And that happened, I think, 3 times in the 9 years that he was their coach. And then all the other years were kind of like this one, where they might go 19-10, and then maybe they round into form in the tournament, or they play really well, or they just crash out and lose. But those teams that were really good, they were smart players because they were older and they had grown in the system, which is why I think the next 2 seasons after this have great potential for Louisville, with guys like Dre Davis and JJ Traynor and Quinn Slazinski and Withers, who have been in the program for a few years and will have been by that point. They got a lot of runouts. And the teams that Mac has had so far have not had the explosive enough guards to get out and run the way that his teams did at Xavier. As much as Jordan Wara and Dwayne Sutton helped them in that area, especially Wara, because he did become a better athlete. They've also had more traditional floor manager type guards in Kristen Cunningham. Ryan McMahon's more of a spot up shooter. Even David Johnson is just, it reminds people of guys like Ron Harper and people like that. So once they get those guys into their system, I think they should be able to score a lot more easy baskets. But the third thing is they always had shooters. They always had guys who could knock down shots. And that, as you said, and I've talked about a lot, is kind of their fatal flaw. Like you can kind of see it coming, where they play, I don't know, if they get into a 7-10 game and they play insert random Big 12 team that probably doesn't have much of a ceiling, I don't know, or they get a Pac-12 team. They play Colorado. Okay. They play Colorado in a 7-10 game and they go 3 of 17 from 3. They're going to lose that game. I mean, the odds are they're going to lose that game. And maybe they have a turnover problem, like you said, or something else that goes with it. But that is their flaw. That is their fatal flaw. But I kind of just feel like that's where this team is. And if they can, and I totally agree with you, if they can scratch and claw their way and maybe beat Duke and get to Thursday this week, and then maybe win a first round game next weekend, I feel like that's a pretty good season for a team, like you said, that's been through a lot. So if they're playing really well, and you've seen Louisville all season, if they're playing really well, give me like, I don't know, 2 or 3 things that you are looking for that would suggest early on that, okay, this team's in good shape.
Well, I mean, I can give you 2 right off the top, and it's really their only formula for success right now. That's what it comes down to. They've got to beat you in shooting percentage, because that's what the whole pack line is determined by. I mean, look at Virginia. They made 3 turnovers the whole game. Mm-hmm. I mean, and they still wound up losing the basketball game because they let Virginia get a little run on them. The second run, I'm going to do my segment scoring. The second segment, Virginia outscored it by 6. And for Virginia, my God, that's like taking a 15-point lead. And so, because they can't shoot their way back in, Louisville, it's very hard for them to shoot their way back in. So I think the first thing they've got to do is they've got to win battle of shooting percentage. I'll come back to that in a minute, but keep that first. And the second thing is they've got to win the battle on the backboards decisively. And included in winning that battle on the backboard, some of them have to be stickbacks, because they're not overnight going to turn into a great shooting team. So you're going to get offensive rebound opportunities. And to me, those take the place of the run-out baskets. I mean, not that you would love run-out baskets, but you got to find easy baskets. And they don't go for steals when they play their pack line. It's not about getting steals. So they're very infrequently going to be shooting a gap and getting a breakaway a layup that way. So they got to get easy baskets on the offensive glass. And then the other end of it is go back to the shooting percentage. I think the problem was they were exposed against Virginia in one regard. If you were Chris, and I always ask people, put yourself in his shoes. Why are they doing this? Well, let's go back. Let's say you're the guy. And you get this team in October, and you got Carlik Jones and David Johnson, who are pretty much head and shoulders your best players. And they're your best players by doing what? By being penetrating guards. They get in the lane. Well, if you're going to get in the lane, are they spot-up shooters? Not really. David can shoot it, but I don't think you'd call him a spot-up shooter. They are guys that have to create off the dribble. So he puts in sets where they're trying to run high ball screens, side ball screens, 1-4 sets. Well, you play Virginia, you can't go around guys. They just, Kihei doesn't let you go around them. They're so good on the dribble that you can't go around them. Well, you found out if they can't get around you, they can't get shots.
Yeah.
There's nobody else who's going to create shots. They don't have a post-up guy. That's where Malik comes in. Malik's good that way. You could flash him to the high post. He can be a passer from there. If you don't play him, he can make a 15-foot shot. He can play with his back to the basket. You don't have any of that. So if they are getting good shots early, they're going to have to find a way to play without the ball a little bit better. I think when they don't play without the ball, they lose Sam Williamson, for example. Sam's not going to create a shot off the dribble, but if you can get him some cuts where maybe a pin down, or you can run him from a weak side cut and he can get it at that. I mean, I've said this before. I don't think it's an exaggeration. He may be as good as anybody in the country in that 15-foot area around he's so confident right now, and he's tall, but you got to play without the ball to get him that shot. So I'd like to see them do more off the ball. If they could do that, I think they'd be harder to guard. They're sometimes easy to guard, Jeff. Because if the guards can't get around anybody, and that's when the fans go, here we go again, the shot clock's down to 5, and you're dribbling. But you can't reinvent the wheel in a week. But I'd like to see them have some sets where they do some things away from the ball. So, obviously, if they're making shots, that helps. That's true for any team. But shooting percentage and rebounding, and especially in offensive glass, I think that's going to be the storylines for this team, no matter who they play.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I've had a few people ask me, well, why can't they beat Florida State? Why do they struggle against Florida State? Why do they struggle against Virginia? Well, first of all, Virginia and Florida State have been the two best teams in the ACC for multiple years in a row. Yeah.
Why is everybody in the league struggling against
they're really good. But I also think that both of those teams play a style that exposes the flaws that Louisville has, especially this year. You mentioned all of the great points about Virginia. They don't have the ability. They don't have the super explosive guards who can beat a Kihei Clark off the dribble. I mean, Clark is a fantastic defender, and they've got other guys who are good too. And against Florida State, they don't have shooters that make Florida State have to stay true to denying and staying up on all 5 players. So when they were playing Florida State, they were beating them a little bit off the dribble once they got into the game. I mean, David Johnson in particular was having some success getting into the lane and scoring around the rim. The problem is that everybody else on Florida State's defensive unit at the time didn't care about the other 4 guys on the floor. They just had to guard the driver. And if you're shooting 20% from 3, Florida State is just going to be like, all right, keep shooting threes, and we're going to make it really hard for you to get to the rim. And we're going to throw 27 7-footers at you and make it hard to score at the rim. And
that's the storyline.
Yeah.
I mean, they're among the best shot blocking teams in the country.
Yeah.
So
and
you
shot alterers too.
You get it in the lane, and you think, hey, I'm in. And they're thinking, no, you're not. We got A, B, and C here ready to and then so it negates Louisville's rebounding advantage, and it negates the ability of their guards to get in the lane and make things happen. And you're right, though. The next logical step would be to get in the lane, draw, and find a shooter, but there's nobody out there to really throw it to that's consistently going to make it. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, and that's where recruiting comes in. I mean, and it's not necessarily on Mac and his staff, because Quinn Slazinski and Josh Nickelberry and guys they recruited, even Charles Minland wasn't a great 3-point shooter at San Francisco. And I realize his health has been an issue, and same with Josh, but those guys were decent shooters, were shooters who should be threats from out there. Quinn should be a threat from out there, and it hasn't clicked for whatever reason this season. And I don't have any reason to believe it won't at some point, but it's just been one of those years. So anyway, all right. So last thing I'll ask you, and then I'll let you get on with your day. I know you're a busy guy this time of year. If you had to pick one guy who is not David Johnson or Carleague Jones, who you think absolutely has to be playing as well as possible over the next 2 weeks? Presumably they'll get into the tournament. Who on Louisville do you think is maybe the most important factor for them?
It's a 1 and 1A. I'll give you the 1A first. I think one of the reasons they played well at the end of the year, Sam understood what Chris was trying to tell him early in the year, which I think when they came into the year and everybody was saying, hey, Sam's got to be that third guy to step up and score. He's got to be that guy. And he wasn't scoring early. I think it got in his head a little bit, and he realized how he can impact the game rebounding right now. Then he is now, you watch him, the ball goes up. He's the first guy to move. He has the Dennis Rodman ability to be the first guy to move to where he thinks the ball's going. He's become a dominating rebounder. And that's when rebounding is such a big part of their recipe for success. I would say I make him 1A, but I think 1 has to be Jalen because they don't have an inside game without him. You saw the Virginia game. He was the invisible man in the first half. In the second half, he had whatever he had. I got my book here if I could look it up, but he was double digits in the second half. He made a 3. He got to the free throw line. He's got to do that. I just don't think they have anybody else who can give them that kind of presence up front yet. He's got to give them some kind of presence there. He's got to make a matchup problem for you rather than the other way around. In other words, Louisville's small, so they say, oh, well, Louisville's got a matchup problem with the other team's front lines, and they will. You play a team as big as Florida State, or you play Jay Huff, who's gigantic. But, Jalen is a guy that can do a lot of things. He can run. Big guys who can run there's some of those easy baskets we talk about. He can be an offensive rebounder. He can step away and make a jump shot. He's got to impact the game. He can't be invisible. And he's invisible. You're really hoping against hope that one of the guys that you talked about that may develop into dominant players are going to step up big, but they have not given you reason to think they're going to do it consistently. He's got to be the guy. He's got to play 40 minutes like he played the second 20 minutes against Virginia. That gives them a chance against a lot of teams.
Yeah. They need the Jalen Withers who got that one run out steal. I forgot which game that was, maybe Georgia Tech, where he got that one run out steal out front, tapped it to himself and ran the full length of the floor and dunked it. I mean, that's the guy who I watched in AAU. I mean, when he was in high school, he would handle the ball. He would step out. He would be a matchup problem because a big would come on him and he took him out to the 3-point line and he could take him off the dribble. He could get in the lane. And if it was a smaller guy, he could post him up and try to score around the rim. And I know that it's got to be so tough to find out in like late October, early November that, hey, you're going to be playing the center position this year instead of the power forward position. But it's hard to disagree with you on picking him as the number one guy. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's got to step up and have a chance. I'm also curious. I don't imagine he'll do it because he hasn't done it yet. But I really think Chris had a decision to make. Sam was playing so well at the 3. Jalen was playing so well at the 4. Maybe you play Wisnitzer and say, look, dude, you got 5 fouls. Go in there, just defend, rebound. We don't care if you ever take a shot. Run the plays. Don't turn the ball over. And then the other guys are still as effective as they've been. You know what I'm saying? Like, in other words, if on a scale of 1 to 10, if those guys were playing at like 9s at the 4 and the 3, you keep them there, and you understand, going from Malik to Wisnitzer is going to be a big drop-off at 5, but you still got those other guys playing at a high level. You put Withers at 5, maybe he's going down and playing at a 6 now, or, Williamson playing the 4. Now he goes down and plays a 6. So maybe overall, I'm not sure your overall effectiveness is higher. I don't know. That's what his decision is. But the fact he didn't play Wisnitzer at all against Virginia leads me to think they're just playing small ball and going to go as far as they can doing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have my headline. Bob Valvano says Gabe Wisnitzer should be playing a lot of minutes for Louisville this year. I'll put that
you guys in the media. You're not going to come out and say, I didn't say that.
I'm kidding.
All right, buddy.
Well, all right. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate it. For those of you out there who would like to listen to a great radio broadcast, just find whatever game Bob is on because it's so educational. So I appreciate you taking a few minutes and enjoy March Madness, my friend.
It's very kind of you, buddy. Always great to talk to you. Take care of yourself, Jeff. Be safe out there. We're not done with this thing yet, so be safe.
That's true. All right. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.
See ya.